For 7 days, the warp storm devoured the ghoul sector, shredding the veil of reality as if some deranged god were clawing at creation itself. On Morteas Prime, beneath the jagged spires of Hive Dominus, the Imperium's war machine gathered in grim resolve against a chaos incursion erupting from the planet's industrial heart. Smoke boiled from the manufactorums. Vast cathedrals of industry now turned into furnaces of damnation, where demon engines prowled the shattered assembly lines, their howls of metal agony echoing across walls slick with the blood of martyred laborers. Deep within the foundries, where once the machine spirits had sung hymns of productivity and order, only warp-born insanity now lingered, whispering through corridors lit by hellfire and grief. Colonel Kastner of the 47th Cadian Shock Troop adjusted his rebreather, eyes reflecting the emerald glow of the cogitator screens as he studied the trembling tactical readouts. 3 companies held the perimeter, their discipline the last line against oblivion, while the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus chanted Binharic prayers to exorcise the corrupted machine spirits that had turned the primary forges against their makers. The air was a choking blend of ozone, burned promethium, and distant death, the thunder of artillery merging with the unholy wails of demonkind. "Sir," Vox Officer Thane's voice cracked through static, his augmetic eye flickering with cascading data streams. Massive warp disturbance, grid 77. Energy pattern not in any archive. Above the manufactorum's heart, reality convulsed. Colors bled into impossible spectrums. Then, from the screaming heavens, something descended. A black-armored figure tearing through the reinforced roof, trailing fire and shattered faith as metal and rockcrete rained into the demon-infested dark below. Steam hissed from the impact crater as the figure rose, slowly, deliberately, each motion mechanical yet filled with purpose. A tattered cape unfurled across his shoulders like the wings of a primordial predator surveying its prey. The rhythmic rasp of his respirator cut through the battlefield's chaos, a sound as ancient and inevitable as death itself. Darth Vader had come to the 41st Millennium. The steady cadence of his breathing filled the silence between artillery strikes, a dirge that announced the arrival of something neither mortal nor divine, but both. Once, he had commanded legions of star destroyers across the galaxy's spiral arms. Now he stood upon a world drowned in madness, beneath spires of blasphemous industry. The Force flowed here, alive, potent, yet foul. It carried whispers of deranged gods and mortals who worshipped them with lunatic devotion. Through the torn walls of the Manufactorum, Vader beheld a sky like coagulated blood, seared by the convulsing light of the warp storm raging above. From the warped machinery around him, shapes began to form. Bloodletters, their brass axes glowing with infernal heat. They reeked of hatred, their essence scraping against his mind like acid. With shrieks of ecstasy and fury, they surged forward, clawed feet carving molten scars into the metal grating. Vader answered with a single gesture, the snap hiss of his lightsaber igniting crimson against the dark. Its blade painted the demon-forged walls in blood-red light. The first creature met him head-on and was cleaved in half, its form collapsing into smoke and screams. Another leapt from the shadows, axe raised for a killing stroke, only to find emptiness as the Dark Lord pivoted aside, his counterstrike removing its head in a single, effortless motion. The remaining demons howled, charging in a frenzy born of the warp. Vader's left hand rose. The Force roared to life. 3 bloodletters froze mid-stride, limbs thrashing, as invisible power crushed throats that had never known breath. His fist clenched, and silence followed. The demons collapsed inward, their forms unraveling into streams of iridescent warp mist that faded like breath in cold air. High above, in the Manufactorum's shadowed galleries, Tech Priest Dominus Fam 7 observed through an array of whirring mechadendrites, each lens capturing data across spectrums both human and divine. His binaric chants filled the Vox network, a staccato hymn of analysis. The intruder's weapon resisted immediate classification. Its energy field mirrored the molecular disruption of archaeotech relics long thought lost to time. Yet what truly seized Fam 7's logic cores was the telekinetic display. Sanctioned psychers could mimic such feats, yes, but none could do so without the taint of mutation or the signature scars of warp exposure. This being radiated nothing of the sort. It was an anomaly, fascinating, heretical, and possibly divine. Fam 7 transmitted a coded report to Colonel Kastner's command channel. Subject exhibits phenomena consistent with sanctioned psycher classification. His Vox voice crackled. Yet, lacks all markers of warp corruption. Even as his words echoed through static, Vader felt the tremor of approaching hostility through the Force. A new presence, heavier, colder. From the eastern gantries emerged a squad of Chaos Space Marines, iron warriors by their blackened heraldry and brass-trimmed scars. Their armor bore the weight of 10 millennia of hatred, each plate engraved with the memory of siege and betrayal. Bolters swept through the smoke with mechanical precision, targeting every shadow as they advanced. Their corruption was not frenzied like the demons. It was measured, bitter, forged in despair. The lead warrior locked on. His bolter thundered. Mass reactive shells screamed through the haze. Vader's blade moved in perfect rhythm, red arcs cutting through the air as each round met annihilation. Explosions flared harmlessly against the machinery. The Iron Warriors fanned out into a disciplined firing line, their volley fire meant to crush through any defense. But Vader had faced legions before, armies of clones, rebels, and machines. He reached out through the Force, seizing the vast cauldron hanging from the Foundry's crane. Reality strained as metal groaned beneath his will. With a silent command of will, the massive crucible tore free from its chains and plummeted. The impact was cataclysmic. A wave of molten metal exploded outward, washing over the Iron Warriors below. Superheated slag hissed and clawed its way into the seams of their power armor, turning sanctified ceramite into burning coffins. 2 of the traitors fell instantly, their death cries dissolving into static across the Vox as their life signs flatlined. The rest scattered, but their retreat ended before it began. Vader was already upon them. His crimson blade carved arcs of pure destruction, slicing through armor and flesh alike. The final chaos, Marine roared in defiance, chainsword screaming as he swung. But the motion ended mid-arc. The red blade took his head cleanly, and the body collapsed with a hollow clang. Desecrated armor clattering against the steel. In the command bunker, Colonel Kastner exchanged coded Vox bursts with Tech Priest Fam 7. "Whatever he is," Kastner growled, "he's eliminating the enemy faster than our armor units. I'm ordering 3rd Company to make contact." Fam 7's Vox reply crackled with unease. "Advisable protocols not in place. Unknown psyker represents extreme contamination risk." But even as he spoke, Vader had already felt them. Through the Force, their approach was clear. Ranks of Imperial guardsmen, disciplined yet trembling beneath their masks, advancing through the smoke-choked corridors. Their lasguns were steady, but their intent wavered between caution and awe. Their minds were an open field of fear, duty, and something deeper, faith. They served an emperor, a being whose presence in the Force burned like a distant, blinding star. Lieutenant Harkin emerged from behind the plasma conduits, his stormtroopers fanning out with precision. "Unknown combatant," he shouted. "Identify yourself and state your allegiance." The respirator's mechanical breath filled the silence, once, twice, before the answer came, cold and resonant. "I am Lord Vader," he said. "You will explain this Emperor you serve." The guardsman froze, instincts screaming against defiance before a being who had just butchered demons and Chaos Marines alike as though sweeping away dust. Lieutenant Harkin's vox crackled to life. "Command, this is Harkin. The unknown requests information about the God Emperor, awaiting guidance." A pause, then Colonel Kastner's graveled voice came through the static. "Bringing him in would need inquisitorial clearance, but damn it, we need every advantage we can get. Tell him the Emperor protects, and ask if he stands with us against the ruinous powers." Through the Force, Vader felt the pulse of their conviction. Their faith blazed like stars in the void, raw, unyielding, untainted by deceit. It stirred something long buried within him, a faint echo of the devotion he once offered to his own Emperor. Yet theirs burned with a purity his had never known. There was no hunger for control here, only desperate belief holding back annihilation. "Your Emperor?" he asked at last, his voice a measured rumble through the respirator. "Does he rule through strength?" Harkin straightened instinctively, reciting the creed as if in temple. "Through divine will and righteous fury, he is the master of mankind, the light in the darkness, eternal and undying." Vader stood silent, absorbing the words. Another Emperor, another endless war between order and chaos. The Force whispered fragments of truth from the minds around him. Visions of a golden throne that had burned for 10,000 years, of suns scattered across the stars, of an empire built upon faith, sacrifice, and stagnation. It was an echo of his own galaxy's fall, yet magnified beyond comprehension. "Take me to your commanders," he said finally, his tone a command that brooked no argument. "I would know more of this Emperor's dominion." The journey to Colonel Kastner's command post wound through 3 kilometers of shattered manufactorum and blood-soaked corridors. Vader advanced among the Imperial ranks like a shadow of judgment, every step shifting the tide. Where Chaos cultists broke through a line, arcs of blue-white lightning flared from his hand, leaving only blackened corpses. When a demon engine tore through a wall of rockcrete, its screech was cut short as his will crushed steel and warp energy alike into twisted ruin. Wherever he passed, discipline returned, fear faded. And for the first time that day, the soldiers of the Imperium began to believe the Emperor truly protected them. Tech Priest Pham 7 recorded every manifestation of the stranger's power, his mechanical tones flickering between fascination and alarm. Each act defied Imperial classification, an anomaly that operated outside every known doctrine, yet with terrifying precision. No trace of chaos taint corrupted his aura, but his power eclipsed that of even the most gifted, sanctioned psychers. Most perplexing of all was his weapon, a rod of burning light, plasma caged within a magnetic field whose principles eluded Mechanicus logic entirely. In the command bunker, Colonel Kastner waited, flanked by an honor guard and a live Vox link to Sector Command. The doors hissed open, and the figure entered. He moved with the calm certainty of dominion, each step measured, deliberate. His cape flowed like liquid shadow behind him. When he spoke, his voice resonated with command, deep, metallic, and absolute. The voice of one accustomed to ordering fleets, of bending worlds to his will. "Colonel Kastner," Vader said, the name drawn effortlessly from the man's thoughts. Your Emperor. Tell me of his dominion. Kastner gestured toward the tactical hololith, its green light bathing his scarred features. The God Emperor rules 1,000,000 worlds, he said reverently. For 10 millennia, his light has guided mankind against the alien, the heretic, and the demonic. We are his sword and his shield, dying gladly in his name. Vader listened in silence. Through the Force, he touched the edges of their faith, saw a galaxy-spanning empire forged in blood and devotion, sustained for 10,000 years by sheer belief. 1,000,000 worlds, endless war, a civilization vast beyond reason, yet locked in decay. The realization unsettled him. Here was an empire greater than the one he had once served, yet stagnant, strangled by its own eternity. Your Emperor? He asked, the words deliberate. Does he still lead your armies? Silence followed. Doubt flickered in the colonel's mind like a dying signal. Even the tech priest's mechadendrites stilled, lenses contracting in what passed for unease. Finally, Kastner spoke, voice rigid with creed. The God Emperor guides us from the Golden Throne upon Holy Terra. Through the Astronomicon, his will lights the galaxy. Vader said nothing. The Force trembled with what lay unspoken, an empire worshipping a corpse, its faith the only thing keeping the stars from going dark. Vader felt the truth pulsing beneath their faith, a truth none of them dared voice. Their Emperor was dying, and had been dying for millennia. Whatever power sustained this crumbling civilization was waning, leaving humanity to fight a losing war against the slow decay of all things. Through the Force, he saw flashes of the reality they refused to name. A corpse god entombed in machinery, kept alive by endless sacrifice, presiding over an empire, gnawing at its own bones to maintain the illusion of divine strength. It was an echo of the same rot he had once served, a reflection too familiar to ignore. Before his thoughts could form into words, the bunker erupted in alarms. Klaxons wailed as Tech Priest Fam 7's mechadendrites snapped to life, interfacing with the command network in a flurry of code. Massive demonic incursion. Grids 44 through 68, he reported in binary-laced tones. Classification: Greater Demon, likely Bloodthirster manifestation. Through the bunker's reinforced viewports, the sky split apart like torn flesh. A colossal shape descended from the wound in reality, its brass armor catching the glow of burning cities below. The Bloodthirster's roar shattered glass across multiple hive levels as it struck ground in Morteas Prime's commercial heart. Where its hooves met rockcrete, the surface cracked and bled. All units fall back to defensive positions, Kastner commanded over the Vox. Prepare for orbital bombardment on my mark. Vader watched in silence, studying the beast through the Force. Its presence burned, a monument to rage older than empires, sustained by the slaughter of ages. It had felled space marines, knights, and titans alike, leaving only ruin in its wake. Yet none of it mattered. Your orbital strike will fail, he said evenly. A greater demon of this magnitude can only be defeated by power equal to its own. My lord, Kastner began, voice unsteady. That creature has annihilated entire space marine companies. Even Terminators couldn't. His protest ended in a strangled gasp as an invisible grip tightened around his throat. Vader didn't squeeze hard enough to harm, only enough to silence. The lesson was clear. I have faced gods before, Colonel, he said, his voice cold, mechanical, absolute. This demon is merely another obstacle. He released him and turned toward the bunker's exit, the hiss of his respirator punctuating the stunned silence that followed. Behind him, Vader felt the swirl of conflicting emotion, terror, awe, and a desperate, childlike hope. None of these soldiers had ever met anyone who spoke of confronting a greater demon as if it were simply a matter of tactics and will. Outside, Hive Dominus burned. The Bloodthirster rampaged through the commercial sectors, a walking cataclysm of brass and flame. Its barbed whip carved blazing scars through hab blocks housing millions, igniting towers that collapsed in thunderous waves of fire and stone. Every swing of its axe sheared ferrocrete and steel as effortlessly as it butchered flesh, turning entire districts into screaming avalanches of ruin. In its wake came the cultists, warp-twisted wretches drawn to their master's presence, their minds shredded by its radiating madness. Vader advanced along the Hive's main arterial, moving against the tide of fleeing citizens. Imperial guard formations parted instinctively, like the sea before a warship's prow, unable to stand before the weight of his presence. Civilians stumbled and fell to their knees, torn between reverence and terror. Some whispered prayers to the Emperor, others traced the aquila across their chests, sensing without understanding that something far beyond their faith was unfolding. 2 kilometers away, the Bloodthirster turned its gaze upon him. Its demonic sight pierced smoke and flame to lock onto the lone black-armored figure below. Power thrummed around Vader like a distortion in reality itself. Something alien to this galaxy's order, a shadow that did not belong. It was a presence unlike anything born of this galaxy, a shadow that carried the echoes of different wars, of another kind of darkness. The Bloodthirster's voice erupted across the ruins, a thunderclap of hate that shattered windows for entire blocks. Mortal, you reek of alien pain. Khorne will delight in your skull upon his throne. In answer came the hiss of ignition. Vader's crimson blade came to life, its glow painting the rubble in a blood-red light. You know nothing of suffering, he said, his tone low, deliberate, merciless. Allow me to educate you. The demon bellowed in fury and lunged forward, wings propelling its titanic frame through the air at a speed no mortal eyes could follow. Its axe, an artifact forged from pure rage, descended with the power to cleave battle tanks in two. But when it struck, the Dark Lord was gone. He moved with preternatural precision, stepping aside as the weapon obliterated the ground where he had stood. In the same motion, his lightsaber carved a molten line across the demon's thigh, and the creature's blood, thick, incandescent ichor, splattered onto the street, eating through rockcrete with a hiss of acid. The Bloodthirster spun, impossibly agile for its enormity, its whip snapping outward to ensnare him. But the Force flowed through Vader like instinct, guiding every motion. The whip met only air as he leaped 30 meters upward, landing on the jagged balcony of a half-collapsed hab block. From that vantage, he saw the scale of the destruction, the hive ablaze for 17 city blocks, columns of fire spiraling toward the open warp rift above like offerings to hell itself. Below, Imperial forces held a doomed perimeter, their last fire useless against the mountain of flesh and brass. Even the tech priest's sanctified weapons barely scorched its hide. The Bloodthirster roared, its wings unfurling wide as it ascended toward him once more. Axe and whip poised to rend the insolent figure who dared defy the chosen champion of Khorne. As the Bloodthirster surged upward, Vader extended his will through the Force and seized the building's structural supports. With a single thought, he brought the entire hab block down. Thousands of tons of ferrocrete and steel screamed as they tore free, collapsing in a thunderous avalanche that swallowed the demon whole. Dust and debris engulfed the streets. Shockwaves shattered what few windows remained. Any mortal creature would have been obliterated, but this was no mortal. The Bloodthirster rose from the ruin moments later, brass armor glowing, wings unfurled, its roar laced now with true rage. The assault had not wounded it, it had insulted it. Vader was already gone, leaping effortlessly to a neighboring structure crowned with a massive industrial ventilation array. The machine spirits here were long fled, their sanctified essence consumed by the warp storm's corruption, leaving only the carcass of forgotten machinery. Vader reached into the Force once more. The colossal fan assemblies began to spin faster and faster, howling like the ghosts of the dead as he drove them beyond their limits. When the demon launched itself toward him again, he released his grip. The blades sheared free like titanic projectiles, each one several tons of sharpened steel hurled at supersonic velocity. The first slammed into the demon's chest, crushing it backward into the ground. The second severed part of its left wing. The third buried itself deep into its shoulder, releasing a fountain of molten ichor that hissed as it struck the rubble below. For an instant, the monster faltered. Then the bleeding stopped. The wounds closed before Vader's eyes. Warp energy knitting flesh and brass back together with obscene vitality. It landed heavily amid the flaming ruins, raising its axe toward the crimson heavens. "Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows," it roared, its voice a cathedral of fury echoing across the burning hive. The Bloodthirster roared, and the air itself ignited with raw warp energy. "Only that it flows eternally," it bellowed, its voice rippling across Hive Dominus like a living curse. The demon's power spread outward, unseen but absolute, threading through every human mind it touched. Guardsmen turned their laser guns on one another, discipline shattering beneath waves of bloodlust. Civilians clawed and tore with their bare hands, their eyes gone feral under the weight of borrowed fury. Even tech priests faltered, their emotional dampeners overrun as aggression surged through their circuitry. Vader felt the pressure too, an ocean of rage pressing against the walls of his mind, molten and merciless. But where others drowned, he channeled it. His anger did not consume him. It obeyed him. The dark side flowed through his veins like liquid ice, sharpening his wrath into something lethal, controlled, and utterly precise. He dropped from the ruined hab block to the corpse-strewn street below. Each step he took sent cracks spidering through the ferrocrete as power gathered around him. Streetlights burst in flares of sparks. Burned-out vehicles rose into the air, drawn by invisible hands. The city itself seemed to bow beneath the pressure of his will. The Bloodthirster sensed the change, a predator's instinct recognizing a rival force. With a howl of rage, it charged, wings beating gales of ash and flame, axe trailing fire as it descended to end the duel in one catastrophic strike. Vader did not move. He raised both hands, and the storm answered. Forks of blinding lightning erupted from his fingertips, cascading forward in torrents of pure annihilation. The bolts struck the demon square in the chest, tearing through its brass armor and charring its flesh. The energy signature was unlike anything it had known in 10 millennia of war. Neither the chaotic surge of warp sorcery, nor the sanctified radiance of Imperial psychers. This was colder, older, and infinitely more deliberate. This power was something deeper, something darker and colder, born of emotions even demons found alien and disquieting. The Bloodthirster's advance faltered as the torrent of force lightning tore through its essence. Its brass armor began to buckle and run like molten wax under the relentless current. More devastating still, the energy severed the lifeline that tethered it to the warp, unraveling the very source of its strength and immortality. For the first time in 10,000 years, the demon felt the alien taste of fear. Vader advanced through the tempest he had created, wreathed in his own storm of destruction. His respirator hissed with a steady rhythm of inevitability as lightning danced across the ruins like a living tide. When he was close enough, the storm ceased at his command. The lightsaber flared once more, a crimson sun in the darkness. With a single, merciless stroke, the blade carved into the demon's neck, where brass met corrupted flesh. The Bloodthirster's scream ripped through the city, shattering windows for kilometers around as its vast form began to dissolve, torn apart by a power it could neither comprehend nor resist. Its essence disintegrated into spectral ash, consumed by a darkness older and infinitely more patient than chaos itself. When the echoes died, silence fell over the ruined hive, broken only by the rasp of mechanical breathing and the distant crumble of collapsing towers. Vader stood within the crater that marked the demon's final stand, his cape settling around him like the wings of an ancient predator. Steam rose from his lightsaber, its blade hissing as demon ichor evaporated from its surface. Across the shattered district, Imperial soldiers emerged from cover, staring in reverent disbelief. They had seen the impossible. A lone warrior bringing down a greater demon, an act that normally demanded entire companies of space marines or the intervention of living saints. Through his command bunker's Auspex feeds, Colonel Kastner watched in awed silence, unease growing in his chest. The stranger's power was absolute, but unbound power had always been the Imperium's greatest peril. History had shown that unchecked strength, no matter how righteous, inevitably turned upon the very empire it sought to defend. Colonel Kastner's hands trembled as he activated his Vox link. Sector Command, this is Kastner. We have a Code Amber Psyker event requiring immediate inquisitorial assessment. Threat level may exceed standard parameters. His voice faltered as he watched the dark figure in the distance move steadily toward the upper reaches of Hive Dominus. Vader no longer cared for the aftermath of battle. His mind reached outward through the Force, touching the unseen web of thought that encircled this world. There, beyond the chaos, beyond the fear, he sensed other presences, minds sharp and disciplined, radiating authority far beyond the rank and file. Observers cloaked in secrecy, judges of reality itself. Someone was watching him, weighing his existence, deciding whether he was a weapon to be claimed or a threat to be purged. The Inquisition had taken notice of Darth Vader. On the third moon of Morteas Prime, within the obsidian walls of the Inquisitorial Fortress, Inquisitor Cassiopeia Vex studied the battle footage in cold silence. The glow of data screens reflected off the augmetic lenses that replaced her left eye, cycling through streams of tactical readouts. She had witnessed every form of psychic heresy, from demonic possession to Xenos sorcery. But this was something else. The stranger's abilities shattered every known metric. His power output exceeded that of most sanctioned battle psychers, yet there were no signs of warp resonance, mutation, or corruption. "Interrogator Thorn," she said evenly. "Compile a full tactical assessment, power classification, potential threat rating, and possible applications for Imperial command." Her subordinate's mech-augmented fingers clattered across the cogitator, running comparisons through thousands of archived encounters. "Preliminary report indicates potential Alpha-class Psyker, my lady. Power projection beyond recorded parameters. However, his tactics exhibit strong Imperial alignment. Discipline, precision, no indication of chaos influence." Vex replayed the footage of the Bloodthirster's death. Frame by frame, the crimson blade sliced through demonic essence with surgical exactitude. The energy pattern of the weapon was utterly alien. Neither plasma, nor power field, nor any recorded archaeotech. Yet its purity against chaos was undeniable. "Prepare interrogation protocol 7, Vex ordered at last. "If this being serves the Emperor's cause, we will know. If not..." Her hand rested lightly on the bolt pistol at her hip, the gesture needing no explanation. Across the gulf of space, Vader felt their focus upon him, cold, precise, and fearful. He turned his gaze skyward, and for a moment, the Force bridged the distance between hunter and hunted. They believed their understanding of control was absolute, arrogant in their conviction that no anomaly could exist beyond the Inquisition's grasp. They would come for him soon, armed with their relics, their tortures, their sanctified tools honed by 10,000 years of purging heresy. Let them come. He had served one emperor already, and learned the immutable laws of power, the loyalty it demanded, the destruction it exacted. If this new Imperium required a demonstration of strength, he would oblige. Trial by combat, interrogation, subjugation, it made no difference. The galaxy had changed, but the nature of dominion had not. Power ruled, faith obeyed. Everything else was illusion. Above Morteas Prime, the warp storm began to unravel, its crimson tendrils retreating into the immaterium as order reluctantly reclaimed the sky. Beneath that dying tempest, Vader descended into the middle levels of Hive Dominus. Civilians scattered at his approach. Some fell to their knees, trembling in reverent terror, hands clasped in prayer to the Emperor they thought he served. Others fled down side corridors, desperate not to draw his gaze. Their reactions told him everything about this civilization. The endless fear, the ritualized submission, the worship of distant authority masquerading as salvation. It was a structure he understood perfectly. He had built one like it once, across another galaxy's stars. The difference was not in purpose, but in scale, and in the magnitude of the monsters each empire used to justify its tyranny. He found what he sought in the heart of the Hive, the grand commercial cathedral, a monument to faith and commerce entwined. Beneath towering buttresses, carved with scenes of the Emperor's victories, merchants traded relics and rations, while priests intoned hymns to sanctify each transaction. Servo skulls drifted between the arches, whispering litanies of maintenance and surveillance. Even here, amid devotion and routine, the air was thick with fear and the cold certainty of control. At the heart of the cathedral stood a towering effigy of the God Emperor, its once gilded face worn smooth by millennia of kneeling pilgrims. Yet Vader's gaze drifted past it to a smaller shrine, one less grand, but far more intriguing. There, arranged in a semicircle, stood 18 figures rendered in cold marble and reverence, the Primarchs. Each was sculpted in a posture of triumph or contemplation, embodiments of the Emperor's will given flesh. Through the Force, Vader reached out, not to the stone, but to the echoes imprinted within it. He felt centuries of devotion, grief, and guilt woven into the statue's psychic residue. These were not mere heroes. They had been sons, crafted beings molded to embody perfection, destined to carry their father's dream across the stars. And like all such creations, they had fallen. Civil war had scattered them, betrayal had consumed them, and the empire they built had been left to choke on its own sanctity. The pattern was painfully familiar. Another father, another lineage forged for conquest, another dynasty devoured by the weight of its own ambition. "You see it too," came a voice behind him. Vader turned. An elderly priest approached, his crimson robes marked with the sigils of the Adeptus Ministorum. His name, drawn easily from the currents of thought around him, was Cornelius. The man's mind radiated both faith and sorrow. Decades of theological reflection, tempered by quiet disillusionment. Unlike the soldiers and clerks who had crossed Vader's path, this one understood something of consequence. The cost of serving a god who demanded everything. "Tell me of their father," Vader said, his respirator's rhythm echoing through the vaulted nave. Cornelius looked up at the great golden statue, its face both merciful and merciless beneath the flickering lumen light. "He is the master of mankind," the priest intoned softly. "The eternal guardian who guides humanity through the darkness that seeks to consume it. For 30,000 years, Cornelius murmured, he has watched over us from the golden throne, his will made manifest through his servants and champions." Yet beneath the priest's reverent tone, Vader sensed the truth his words could not speak aloud. The Emperor was dying, had been dying for 10 millennia, sustained only by the daily immolation of 1,000 psychers whose souls fed the dimming ember of his existence. The empire he forged was collapsing under the weight of its own sanctity, paralyzed by dogma, ossified by fear. His vision had rotted into ritual. His sons, the mighty Primarchs, had either fallen to corruption or vanished into silence. "And his sons?" Vader asked, his gaze drifting over the ring of marble demigods. "Where are they now?" Cornelius's answer came with the slow cadence of mourning. "Lost to us. Some were seduced by the ruinous powers. Others disappeared into myth, chasing purposes only they could fathom. Their legacy endures through the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines. But even they are but echoes of what their sires once were." Vader turned his attention to the statues, studying each in turn. There was Horus, the favored son, whose betrayal had splintered the Emperor's dream. Sanguinius, the angel, whose death had purchased victory at the cost of his father's humanity. And in the farthest recess of the shrine, half-veiled in shadow, stood another. The figure's form stirred something within him. A warrior in black armor, a cape billowing like the wings of a hunting bird. A skull-faced helm concealing expression, yet radiating wrath. The sculptor's hand had captured command, sorrow, and restrained fury in a single stance. But what caught Vader's eye was the weapon gripped in its right hand, a blade that devoured light, drinking it into endless night. "That one," he said quietly, his mechanical voice resonating in the chamber as he pointed toward the shadowed statue. "Who is he?" Vader asked, his voice a low echo that seemed to vibrate through the cathedral's ancient stone. Cornelius followed his gaze, and unease shadowed his features. "That figure, my lord, is legend and controversy. Some claim he represents the lost 11th Primarch, struck from all Imperial record for crimes too dreadful to name. Others believe he is a harbinger of the Emperor's return, a dark angel who shall rise when the Imperium faces its final hour." Beneath the priest's spoken reverence, Vader sensed fragments of forbidden truth flickering through his thoughts. Scraps of prescribed scripture, fragments of apocrypha whispered in secrecy. They spoke not of chaos, but of something else, a power that predated it. A force born not of madness or corruption, but of emotion disciplined into shadow, older and colder than the fevered hunger of the warp. What was his name? Vader pressed, his tone both curious and commanding. Cornelius hesitated, glancing about as if the very walls might be listening. "The records call him only the Dark Father," he murmured. "It is said he will return when the Emperor's light finally dies, to gather the lost and the forgotten into a new kind of brotherhood, one not built upon faith, but upon the acceptance of inevitable darkness. The words struck Vader like a chord, plucked in the depths of his mind, a resonance of recognition. Through the Force, he felt their truth blooming within him. This galaxy already carried myths of his coming, echoes of prophecy that had awaited him long before his arrival. Whether born of true foresight or born from the galaxy's hunger for symbols, the Imperium had carved a place for him in its theology. He was still studying the inscription beneath the statue when the cathedral's proximity alarms erupted in shrill unison. Guardsmen snapped into defensive ranks. Servo skulls descended from the vaulted ceiling, weapons unfolding with insect precision. Through the stained glass windows, depicting the Emperor's triumphs in brilliant crimson and gold, Vader saw black inquisitorial dropships descending onto the cathedral's landing platforms. "Stay calm, my lord," Cornelius urged, though fear coursed through his every thought. The Inquisition investigates all manifestations of unusual power. If your purpose is pure, my lord, you have nothing to fear from their questions, Cornelius murmured, though his trembling voice betrayed his doubt. Vader's lightsaber remained unlit, but his grip tightened around the hilt as the presence of hostile minds brushed against his awareness. Through the cathedral's labyrinthine corridors came the Inquisitors and their soldiers. Predators cloaked in sanctity, armed with faith sharpened into weapons. Their minds radiated confidence born of long experience in purging heresy and hunting monsters that haunted lesser men's dreams. Their arms were anointed in sacred oils, their armor engraved with wards of protection older than most civilizations. But such trinkets would mean nothing before the dark side. The cathedral's great doors thundered open. Inquisitor Vex entered at the head of her retinue, stormtroopers in black carapace, acolytes draped in parchment and incense smoke. The machine spirit of her power armor growled with restrained fury. Her augmetic eye whirred softly as it fixed on him, scanning for signs of mutation or corruption. The readings confounded her. This figure radiated no trace of warp exposure, yet his power eclipsed anything in Imperial record. Worse still, her psychic ward slid off him entirely, as if the universe itself refused to define his existence. "Unknown Psyker," she declared, her voice a weapon forged in authority. "You will submit to interrogation and psychic examination in the name of the God Emperor. Resistance will result in immediate termination." Vader turned slowly to face her, cape folding around him like a living shadow. His respirator exhaled once, cold, deliberate. When he spoke, the sound reverberated through the cathedral, low and resonant, stirring instinctive dread in every soul present. "I am Lord Vader," he said. "I do not submit to interrogation." Vex's gauntleted hand drifted toward her bolt pistol, but froze as invisible pressure seized her throat. The stormtroopers snapped up their hellguns, only to find their targeting systems flickering and blind. To their sensors, the figure before them was both there and not, existing in the void between perception and reality. Vader took a single step forward, his voice as implacable as a verdict. "You will stand down. Your Emperor has need of servants who understand power, not inquisitors who fear it." The Force grip tightened, enough to remind her who held dominion here. Gasping for breath, Vex choked out the activation codes that unleashed her retinue's combat protocols. The stormtroopers opened fire in perfect unison, their hellgun volleys hammering through the incense-thick air, each burst designed to pierce power armor and incinerate whatever lay beneath. Their acolytes joined the assault, chanting frenzied litanies of banishment and purification as the cathedral echoed with holy fury. Yet their faith met only emptiness. Vader moved faster than human perception could track, his form a blur between the colossal pillars. The crimson blaze of his lightsaber ignited mid-leap, cutting through a stormtrooper's hellgun in a shower of molten shards before continuing cleanly through the man's neck. He landed with the precision of a predator, pivoting behind another trooper and driving his blade through carapace and flesh alike. The air hissed as molten metal dripped from the wound. Before the survivors could realign their aim, their weapons were already gone, wrenched from their hands by unseen force, suspended midair for a heartbeat, then crushed into twisted ruin with a single thought. The acolytes' chants grew desperate, their sanctified words faltering as their wards splintered. Their psychic barriers, crafted to withstand demons, corruption, and the warp's horrors, were useless against this alien power. It was not born of the Imperium. It bent reality through will alone. One young acolyte screamed as Vader's presence brushed his mind, blood streaming from his eyes and nose before he collapsed, his sanity burned away by contact with the abyss. Inquisitor Vex drew her consecrated blade, its power field crackling with holy energy. She advanced despite knowing the futility of the act. Every calculation, every protocol failed before this impossible figure. His aura radiated strength beyond Alpha Class, yet no trace of warp corruption marked him. "What are you?" she gasped, the words forced through the invisible grip crushing her throat. Vader released her, letting her fall to the cold marble floor, clutching for air. His respirator filled the silence, one slow breath, then another, as he regarded the shattered inquisitorial squad not with malice, but with detached curiosity, as though dissecting a puzzle the galaxy itself had presented him. They had discipline, courage, and faith, but all within fragile limits that shattered when confronted by something far beyond human design. Vader's voice cut through the charged air, low and absolute. "I am what your Emperor requires," he said, extinguishing the crimson blade with a hiss that echoed like a final judgment. "A servant who understands that order is not granted. It is enforced." The words hung heavy in the smoke-thickened cathedral as the ancient Vox relays came alive with a burst of static. Colonel Kastner's voice broke through, sharp and urgent. "All units, priority alert. Massive warp disturbance detected in high orbit. Chaos fleet emerging from the storm's wake. 12 vessels confirmed. Battlecruiser signatures included. The timing. Impossible coincidence." The report sent a ripple of dread through every soul within earshot. The death of the demon had torn a wound in the veil, turning the very fabric of the warp into a beacon for those who dwelled within its madness. Now, across the cold void, warships corrupted by 10,000 years of damnation slipped from unreality into orbit above Morteas Prime, their hulls glistening with the scars of the Imperium's touch. The real war had finally arrived. Vader turned his gaze toward the heavens, feeling the disturbance ripple through the Force. A tide of agony and fury as countless corrupted lives drew closer. These were not mere heretics or mindless beasts. They were soldiers, disciplined and ancient, led by Chaos Space Marines who had survived since the fall of Horus himself. At their head burned a will old and monstrous, one of the original betrayers who had watched the Imperium's golden age die in fire. He sensed that hatred now, reaching for him across the void. "Inquisitor," he said, offering a gloved hand to Vex, his tone measured but carrying the weight of command. "You will be essential in what comes next, but you will follow my lead or die in vain while your Emperor's enemies claim this world." Vex's augmetic eye pulsed with data, struggling to reconcile protocol with the grim calculus of survival. She was sworn to detain unregistered psychers, to bring them before the Inquisition for judgment. but reason faltered in the shadow of the storm. He had done what an entire regiment could not. Her breath trembled as she traced the aquila across her chest. "The Emperor protects," she whispered, though even she could not tell whether it was a prayer or a plea. Her voice cut through the chaos, steadier than she felt. "What are your orders?" The question stunned them all, even Vader. He had expected defiance, accusations of heresy, perhaps the cold recitation of imperial decree. Instead, the Inquisitor chose reason over pride. It was rare, and in this age of blind faith, almost revolutionary. "Rally your remaining forces," he commanded, his tone brooking no argument as he strode toward the shattered entrance of the cathedral. "Coordinate with the local guard regiments. Establish fortified lines in the upper hive. The enemy will strike for the heart of the city." His words were still echoing when the heavens tore open. The sky bled flame as chaos drop pods and boarding torpedoes streaked downward, their descent burning crimson scars across the clouds. Each impact was a hammer blow upon the world's dying defenses. The void shields flared, sputtered, and failed, their protective fields collapsing under the relentless fury of orbital bombardment. Whole districts vanished in blossoms of fire as the enemy cleared their landing zones with surgical brutality. Then came the first wave. Chaos Space Marines slammed into the planet's surface, their impact craters still smoking as they advanced. Blackened ceramite boots crushed the aquilas of the Imperium into dust. These were iron warriors, siege masters, builders of death, veterans of 10,000 years of slaughter. Their armor bore the story of their damnation. Jagged brass sigils, battle scars that glowed faintly with demonic energy. They moved like machines, precise, relentless, securing intersections, deploying autocannons, turning the ruins into killing fields before the defenders could even regroup. At their forefront strode warsmith Draknor. His frame was a monument to the corruption of both man and metal. Power armor grafted into flesh, pistons and cabling pulsing like veins beneath his plating. The rotary mechanism of his autocannon arm screamed as it locked onto new coordinates. A single organic eye glared from beneath his helm, a light with a hatred that had burned since the days of Horus. To him, the Imperium was not a bastion of order, but a lie sustained by the blood of fools. He had come to Morteas Prime, drawn by the psychic ripple that marked the stranger's arrival. The presence that promised a battle worthy of a god's attention. Draknor had come, not out of obedience to his dark gods, but out of curiosity, to witness whatever new abomination the corpse emperor had set loose upon the galaxy. Vader felt his presence before the censors ever could, a burning pressure against his mind like acid searing through steel. This was no mindless berserker, but a calculating intellect drowned in the tides of chaos, sharpened rather than broken by 10,000 years of damnation. Through that malignant awareness, Vader perceived the full scope of the threat descending upon Morteas Prime. Legions of corrupted space marines, demon engines howling in binary fury, and tech marines turned heretics whose intimate knowledge of imperial systems made them saboteurs of terrifying precision. The cathedral's reinforced gates detonated inward under a barrage of cracked missiles, the shockwave shaking the ancient stone foundations. Smoke and shrapnel rained across the nave as chaos havocs advanced, bolters roaring, each shell a miniature explosion that shredded pews and statues alike. But their prey was gone. Only flickering candles and drifting ash remained. From the shattered bell tower above, Vader stood watching, electro-binoculars in hand, the cityscape burning in reflected crimson. The enemy was already digging in, establishing kill zones around the governmental district, fortifying intersections, laying out firing lanes that turned every approach into a death trap. He could see it all unfolding with machine-like precision. Standard Imperial doctrine would demand an immediate counteroffensive, multi-regimental assaults, supported by orbital bombardments if the Navy could somehow punch through the Chaos Fleet. But Vader knew better. That plan would drown in blood before it even began. Activating the comm link Vex had given him, he spoke, his voice metallic and absolute. Inquisitor Vex, issue command to all Imperial units. Hold your ground. Maintain defensive positions. Do not engage. Static flared before her voice returned, strained but firm. My lord, that violates engagement doctrine. If we allow them to consolidate. Your doctrine, Vader cut in, was written for wars against men. These are not men. They are ancient killers who have fought since before your Imperium learned to crawl. To meet them head-on is to die without meaning. His final words echoed through the comm like a sentence, cold, certain, undeniable. Conventional tactics will only feed them more corpses, Vader said, his tone leaving no room for debate. To his surprise, there was no argument. Only a sharp acknowledgement over the Vox. Whatever else Inquisitor Vex might be, she was not a fool. She recognized authority when it was earned. Her regiments would hold their lines and await his signal. Vader severed the comm link and turned toward the shattered stairwell leading down from the cathedral's heights. Through the Force, the battlefield unfolded before him like a living map, a web of motion and intent. He could see the rhythm of the enemy's advance, the narrow corridors where their sensor grids overlapped, the blind spots between patrol sweeps. The Iron Warriors were masters of siegecraft, but they fought predictably, disciplined, methodical, bound by patterns honed over millennia. They were prepared for tanks, artillery, and massed infantry, not for a phantom. The first of them died without even realizing death had come. A whisper of movement, a hiss, and the crimson blade carved upward through ceramite and flesh. The headless corpse toppled with a metallic clang that was swallowed by the storm. The second turned at the sound, bolter raised, only to choke as an unseen hand crushed his windpipe, armor groaning under the pressure until it caved inward. Silence returned. Vader moved on. Beneath the city's ruins, he slipped through maintenance shafts and shadowed corridors like a wraith. Each encounter ended before it began. A flicker of red light, a collapsing body, the faint hum of the saber extinguished. Every strike precise, every death intentional. He left no pattern to follow, only terror to spread. Communications officers fell at their posts, heavy weapon teams were found torn apart mid-transmission, and entire squads vanished from the tactical grid without a trace. By the time Warsmith Draknor realized his perimeter was collapsing, half his support teams were gone. Impossible, he snarled through his Vox, watching red icons disappear one by one from his helmet display. No single operative can breach Iron Warrior protocols. But the data didn't lie. His fortress was being eaten alive from within by something unseen. Something that moved through their ranks like the shadow of death itself. Worse still, Draknor's auger arrays showed nothing. No warp residue, no psychic imprint, no rational explanation for how the intruder was evading detection. It was as if the enemy existed between moments of reality, slipping through folds of space that should not have been there. The Warsmith's growl reverberated through the command net. All units, consolidate on the primary command center. The order echoed through the comms as the Iron Warriors pulled back toward the fortified bunker that had once served as the planetary governor's refuge. Its ceramite walls were meters thick, reinforced to endure the fury of Titan-class bombardment. Draknor stood within its iron heart, sensors sweeping in relentless arcs, havocs covering every corridor with overlapping fields of fire. He believed himself secure. He was wrong. Outside, amid the pulverized bones of a collapsed hab block, Vader moved through the ruins like smoke given form. His armor made no sound. His presence was a void within the Force. A shadow sliding through chaos. He felt the hum of enemy sensors brushing over him, and simply wasn't there. The Force flowed through him, showing him paths through their defenses, pulses of movement that predicted the rhythm of their machines. He knew their weakness: dependence. The Iron Warriors trusted their augurs, their auspex, their machine spirit constructs, not realizing that the very systems they relied upon could be turned against them. Reaching out with both mind and will, Vader touched the fortress' electrical network. Circuits screamed. Power relays overloaded in a cascade of failure that rippled through the structure like veins bursting under pressure. Lights guttered out. Air systems coughed and died. The Vox channels filled with static as communication relays melted into silence. Then the void shields began to flicker, their harmonic frequencies stuttering under invisible interference. "What is happening?" Draknor roared, slamming a servo fist against a console as warning runes flooded his display. Tech Marines scrambled to stabilize the systems, their mechanical chants rising in desperation. But all their sacred canticles, all their centuries of corrupted ritual, meant nothing before an adversary who understood technology not as faith, but as truth. Every system the Iron Warriors restored failed again within seconds, power returning only to die in another cascade of sparks. The once mighty fortress had become a tomb of flickering lights and dying machine spirits. Then the world exploded. The bunker's blast doors, designed to endure Titan-class bombardment, tore apart in a single, concussive instant. Metal screamed, walls buckled, and a wave of smoke rolled into the command center. Out of that storm stepped a figure in obsidian armor, his cape unfurling behind him like the wings of some ancient angel of death. Red light ignited with a hiss that silenced every voice. The glow of the lightsaber danced across shattered consoles and fractured displays, painting the Iron Warrior's stronghold in hellish illumination. Draknor turned, autocannon arm locking onto target. But his machine spirit refused obedience. Runes blinked erratically. Targeting reticles scrambled. The first burst of fire tore through empty air as Vader advanced, shifting with impossible precision between the streams of explosive rounds. Bolters joined the chorus, their mass reactive shells detonating harmlessly against invisible force. "What are you?" Draknor bellowed, casting aside his failing weapon for a chainsword whose demon-touched teeth shrieked for blood. The clash that followed split the command chamber with light and fury. Red plasma met spinning adamantine, two relics of lost ages grinding against one another in a storm of sparks. For a heartbeat, they held. Then the saber's edge began to burn through the chainsword's teeth, melting sanctified metal into molten shards that scattered like embers in the dark. Draknor roared and swung his armored fist, a blow that could have caved in ceramite plating. But Vader's gloved hand rose and stopped it mid-strike. The warsmith froze, every servo whining in protest as unseen power bound him in place. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Iron Warrior felt something he could not master: fear. Behind the black mask, he sensed not a man, but an abyss that watched him back. Vader's voice was low, mechanical, final. "I am inevitable." The crimson blade plunged through Draknor's chest, cutting through armor, through flesh, through centuries of war. Silence followed. broken only by the rhythmic rasp of mechanical breathing and the crackle of burning circuitry. Beyond the bunker's walls, iron warriors held their positions, awaiting orders that would never come. Within minutes, their formations faltered, discipline giving way to uncertainty. And as they fell back toward their extraction points, the realization settled like ash upon them all. They had not been defeated by numbers or weapons or faith, but by a shadow they had never truly seen. Through the Force, Vader felt her before he saw her. Inquisitor Vex advancing through the shattered streets with a full company of stormtroopers in tight formation. Even amid ruin, her discipline held. She had made the right choice. Let the predator hunt, then move in once the prey was broken. Now her troops would sweep the remnants of the Iron Warriors from the district, while he turned his gaze upward, toward the war still raging beyond the clouds. The battle for the surface was over, but the true enemy still ruled the void. Above Morteas Prime, the Chaos Fleet remained entrenched, its guns dominating the skies. And yet, that was not what made the air tremble. Vader could feel it, a stirring across the warp, vast presences shifting in the dark. Demon princes drawn to the echo of his violence, rogue psychers flaring like dying suns, perhaps even one of the Primarchs themselves taking notice of the anomaly that had entered their eternal war. The true test was coming. High above, aboard the battlecruiser Eternal Malice, Lord Commander Vorak stood before a wall of tactical runes, studying them not with alarm, but with fascination. Draknor's failure did not surprise him. The Iron Warriors had always been predictable, masters of siege, slaves to routine. Their deaths were inconsequential. What interested him was the anomaly that had caused them. The readings were unlike anything recorded by Imperial or Chaos lexicons, a power signature that refused to fit within any known category of psychic or technological origin. Vorak had seen everything. He had stood upon the blackened plains of Terra itself, watched the Emperor's palace burn as Horus and his father tore the galaxy's soul apart. 10 millennia of war had taught him to separate rumor from revelation. This was no ghost story. The figure on Morteas Prime was real, and far more dangerous than either side yet understood. A new variable had entered the Long War, and if harnessed or destroyed, it could alter the fate of the galaxy itself. "Prepare my personal strike force," he intoned, the command folding the bridge into a tense, sacred silence. He would meet this stranger himself and strip away whatever mask hid that intent. Around him, the teleportarium flared to life as Vorak pulled on his Terminator armor. Plates anointed by the Daemon princes, every rim and joint engraved with the skulls of Imperial champions now drawn into his service. The Force weapon at his side thrummed with a restrained warp song, and the Storm Bolter's machine spirit bent close, whispering cold promises of death to the Emperor's servants. If this interloper truly possessed power that demanded Chaos's notice, then he would either kneel before the dark gods or be folded into the same legion of lost souls they had already claimed. Far below, on Morteas Prime's surface, Vader tasted the coming shock like iron on the tongue. A massive psychic disturbance as enemy forces prepared to teleport directly into the Hive City's heart. This would not be a blunt ground assault, but a surgical strike by elite units able to appear at any point inside the planet's defensive perimeter. Their commander exuded a compact, malevolent intelligence. The air around him marked by someone who had watched the Imperium be born and had spent 10 millennia bent on its undoing. Colonel Kastner cut through the comms on Imperial command. Enemy teleportation assault imminent. Evacuate all non-essential personnel from the upper Hive levels and ready your heaviest weapons for close quarters fighting. Understood, my lord, a voice answered. Where do you want us to concentrate our forces? Vader closed his eyes to the currents of the Force, reading probability and consequence. The enemy would choose a place of meaning, a site whose ruin would announce Chaos's supremacy over Imperial authority. There was only one place within Hive Dominus that carried both the weight of symbolism and the promise of sacrilege. The cathedral, Vader answered, his tone absolute. They will strike at the most sacred ground they can reach. Form defensive rings around it, but do not step inside. My lord, if they seize the cathedral, they will not, Vader replied, each word a verdict carved from steel. I will be waiting. As Morteas Prime's sun reached its zenith, its blood-red light spilled across the city like a wound. In the heart of the cathedral, reality convulsed. Warp energies clawed through the veil between worlds, birthing warriors who had carried their hatred across 10,000 years of unending war. Terminator armor coalesced from the Imperium, plates bearing the runes of dark blessings and the scars of empires long dead. Lord Commander Vorak stepped forth from the teleportation circle, his storm bolter already sweeping the shadows. His tactical display showed only silence, dust, ruin, and the echoes of earlier combat. But his corrupted senses prickled. Something vast and cold was here, radiating power that made the demon-touched augurs scream in static. Show yourself, he commanded, voice resonant with the authority of a warlord who had shattered suns. Face me, if you still remember what honor is. From behind the towering statue of the Emperor, a shape detached from the dark. Vader emerged, his cape unfurling like the wings of vengeance, his breathing a mechanical dirge that filled the vaulted chamber. Honor, he said, voice deep and metallic, is a luxury for the weak, a lie born of necessity. The two titans stood across the nave, their power pressing against the fabric of reality itself. Two storms gathering to decide which would consume the other. Vorak's link to the warp unfolded reality into fractal visions, every shimmer revealing branching futures where the death of this armored stranger would feed the gluttony of the dark gods. Yet beneath that endless web, something stirred, an abyss older than chaos itself, governed by laws so alien that even the demon princes recoiled from its touch. What are you? The Chaos Lord demanded, his voice resonating like iron dragged through blood. It was the same question that had haunted Vader since his emergence into this galaxy. I am what this galaxy has been waiting for, came the mechanical reply as the crimson blade of his lightsaber roared to life, casting hellish light across the desecrated altar. The end of its stagnation. Battle ignited with the force of divine wrath. Vorak's Stormbolter thundered, mass reactive shells detonating against unseen barriers, shattering the silence and painting the cathedral's stained glass with explosions that mocked the Emperor's victories. His force weapon burned with warp fire as he charged, servo motors howling under the strain to match the inhuman speed of his foe. But Vader had faced such titans before. Warriors armored in hubris and sanctified steel. His saber sliced through Terminator plate like parchment. Guided by a will that bent gravity and motion itself. Each swing was a calculated inevitability. Each deflection a prophecy fulfilled. The force wrapped around him like a storm unseen by chaos, operating on principles the warp could neither predict nor corrupt. The cathedral quaked beneath their duel, pillars trembling as energy clashed with faith. Vorak fought with the precision of 10,000 years of war, using ruin and debris as weapons, his armors targeting spirits, feeding him endless streams of data. Yet even with all his experience, he felt it. He was standing against something beyond the gods he served. Vorak's predictive targeting arrays flared with data. Yet the readings collapsed into nonsense as his foe moved, fluid, spectral, unbound by geometry or doctrine. Vader struck from angles that should not exist, parrying blows before they were even conceived. Then came the surge. Force lightning erupted from his fingertips, a storm of white-blue fury that crawled over Vorak's armor, shorting circuits and burning through demonic wards sanctified in blood and agony. The Chaos Lord retaliated with a sweeping strike of his force weapon. But it collided with an unseen wall of pressure, the energy rebounding with a shriek of metal and ether. His defense shattered. The crimson blade cleaved through his shoulder guard, sending a smoking plate of demon-touched ceramite crashing to the floor. He staggered back, breath ragged, gene-forged systems already knitting flesh beneath molten armor. "Impossible," he hissed, eyes darting to the ruined pauldron that had once turned aside the fire of titans. What weapon cuts through blessed Terminator plate? Vader gave no reply, only motion. His lightsaber became a streak of red inevitability, striking faster, harder, each blow guided by cold precision. Sparks filled the cathedral like a rain of dying stars as his blade found every weakness. Armor seams, exposed power couplings, servo linkages. The Stormbolter was the first to fall. Severed at the wrist in a flash of molten metal, its sacred rounds spilling uselessly across the floor. The Force weapon followed, cleaved in two as its warp-forged edge met a plasma field fed by the dark side itself. Then came the end. Vorak charged, roaring defiance, and was met by an invisible hand that wrapped around his throat, suspending him effortlessly above the cathedral's altar. His massive frame hung motionless, armor groaning under unseen pressure. "Your chaos gods offer only stagnation, masquerading as change," Vader intoned, the modulation of his voice cutting through the crackle of tortured metal. "I offer something far more valuable." The red blade lunged, piercing the Chaos Lord's chest. Its energy didn't merely kill, it unmade, burning through flesh and faith alike, consuming 10 millennia of corrupted life in a single, merciless instant. As the Chaos Lord's final breath escaped, Vorak's awareness was swallowed by a darkness so absolute it rendered even the Eye of Terror a pale ember by comparison. The cathedral fell into silence, its echoing vastness filled only by the hiss of cooling metal. Vader extinguished his lightsaber, the crimson blade collapsing into nothingness as he surveyed the ruin. Around him lay the shattered husks of Terminator armor that had once endured the siege of Terra, now reduced to scorched fragments, their demonic inscriptions flickering and dying beneath the weight of a power alien to this galaxy's design. The victory rippled outward like a psychic detonation. Across comms and warp frequencies alike, both Imperial and Chaos forces felt its resonance. It was a declaration. A new power had entered the stage, beholden neither to the Corpse Emperor nor to the Dark Gods. Through the Force, Vader sensed the Chaos Fleet's disarray. Fear, disbelief, and the frantic grasping of lesser warlords struggling to seize command. The organized invasion crumbled into infighting and retreat as their confidence shattered against an enemy they could neither comprehend nor resist. Yet, in the deeper currents of the Imperium, awareness stirred. Ancient beings, warp-born minds vast beyond reckoning, turned their gaze toward Morteas Prime. To some, this anomaly was an opportunity. To others, an existential threat. All agreed that the galactic order had shifted, the great game disrupted. Amidst the ruin, Inquisitor Vex approached, her every step measured, her augmetic eye recording the devastation for scrutiny by the High Lords. The air still hummed with residual energy, bending light around the figure at the cathedral's center. "My lord," she said, bowing, tracing the sign of the Aquila across her chest. The enemy fleet is in full withdrawal. Morteas Prime is secure. Her voice held awe and an undertone of dread, for what stood before her was no longer merely an ally of the Imperium, but something far greater and far more uncertain. Vader inclined his head in silent acknowledgement, yet his thoughts were already shifting far beyond the ruined cathedral. Through the Force, he could feel it, the vast and terrible heartbeat of this galaxy. 1,000,000 worlds locked in ceaseless war, 10 millennia of festering grudges, and powers older than reason moving their pieces across a board of endless suffering. The Imperium's decay was not a disease of governance, but a symptom of a deeper rot, a spiritual entropy infecting the very fabric of existence. "Inquisitor," he said at last, his voice low, resonant and absolute. "Arrange transport to your sector command. It is time I spoke with those who wield true authority within this Imperium." Vex hesitated, her synthetic iris narrowing. "My lord, such contact would require authorization from—" "It requires only necessity," he interrupted. And with that, the air thickened. His presence pressed upon her mind like the weight of an ocean, dark and suffocating, impossible to resist. "Your superiors will wish to meet me, whether they comprehend it yet or not. The only question is whether they come as petitioners seeking alliance, or as obstacles to be removed." Her augmetic eye flickered with involuntary emotion. Fear, calculation, awe. This being had accomplished alone what entire crusades failed to do, yet his intentions lay hidden behind that black mask. If he truly appeared before Sector Command, the shock would ripple through the hierarchy like a seismic event, toppling chains of power that had stood for centuries. "I will make the arrangements," she said finally, her tone caught between obedience and unease. "But my lord, they will demand answers. Who you are, what you seek for the Imperium's future." Vader's respirator hissed twice, a measured rhythm between life and machine. He considered her words, and for a moment, even he seemed to dwell in silence. The truth was forming still. This galaxy had shown him visions beyond conquest, possibilities where power served purpose, where order could be forged not from fear alone, but from a unity his former master had never imagined. The Imperium's decay, Vader realized, had never been destiny. Only the failure of those too blind to evolve. "Tell them," he said, turning toward the cathedral's shattered doors, his voice carrying the weight of judgment and prophecy alike, "that Lord Vader has come to restore order to a galaxy that has forgotten the meaning of strength." He paused beneath the fractured archway, crimson light spilling across the scorched marble. "Tell them their Emperor's vision was incomplete, and that I have come to finish what he began." With each step into the open air, the smoke of battle coiled around his silhouette like a living crown. Behind him lay the broken remnants of Chaos champions who had once defied gods. Before him, a galaxy trembling beneath the gravity of something new. Across the stars, ancient powers stirred. Eldritch minds sensing the emergence of a will capable of rewriting the balance between light and dark, order and ruin. The Imperium would soon be forced to choose. Was this being their savior or their doom? Yet that choice, he knew, would matter little. What truly mattered was his own resolve. To forge a new order from the carcass of the old, one disciplined by patience, sharpened by experience, and guided by a vision that transcended faith and heresy alike. The Force flowed through him like a living cosmos, and he understood at last. The galaxy's weakness had been its fear of change. Now it would learn strength, his strength. The stars themselves would kneel before the dominion of the dark side, or burn in the fires of inevitable transformation. In the warp's deepest currents, beings older than creation turned their gaze toward him, some scheming to corrupt, others desperate to destroy. But all knew one truth: the age of stagnation was over. What would rise from its ashes would remake existence itself.